I'll go ahead and introduce our last panelist for the morning. Mr. Patrick Jennings will present the topic of Andre Luiz, the Spiritual Awakening and Mission. Pat Jennings is a native New Yorker currently living in St. Petersburg, Florida. He was a founding member of the Spiritist Group of New York. As a member of the Center Andre Luiz in Tampa, Pat led the study group programs in English, including a mediumship group. In 2011, he founded the Spiritist Society of St. Petersburg, a Spiritist center exclusively in English. Pat has established the Art Supply Store in 2002 and serves on the City of St. Petersburg Public Arts Commission and several not-for-profit boards. Please welcome to the podium Patrick Jennings.
Thank you and good morning. I'm grateful for having this one more learning opportunity. And I have to confess to you that I struggled with this presentation for quite a while, despite having read No Solar quite a few times. I was searching for the moment of Andre Luiz's spiritual awakening, thinking there must have been a moment, an epiphany, perhaps, that took place. Based on my own linear thinking and my preconceived notions about how things work. Frustration then set in, and I stalled. Finally, my guardian angel took pity on me and inspired me with the notion of a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle. And that's the analogy that I have for Andre Luiz's spiritual awakening. And I chose to focus today perhaps more on his awakening rather than his mission, because it struck me that we are all pretty aware through the number of books that he has written and published of what his mission was in terms of the dissemination of information about the spirit world. But as I saw that there were very strong parallels between his awakening and perhaps our own awakening as we become more evolved during this incarnation through the acquisition of our knowledge of the Spiritist doctrine. So each event, each encounter, each experience is a piece of a puzzle. Independently, they don't mean much, but collectively they join together to form a clear picture. Hopefully this presentation will put some of those pieces together. I begin with a conversation that Andre Luiz has with Laura, whose home that he has the opportunity to stay in. And the conversation begins with Andre Luiz and his uniquely inquisitive nature talking about the hour bonus system. And he's intrigued by it. And during the course of what I'm going to talk about, we're going to see some understandings and some insights that he gains. And he begins to see here that this is a learning process that he's going through. He becomes conscious of that. And as it relates to the hour bonus system in No Solar, he understands through this discussion with Laura that that is how things are acquired. And that the price of each step of improvement, that there is a price with each step of our improvement along our spiritual ascent. And what he understands is that he's trying to make things in No Solar fit into systems and formats that he used on the material plane. And then Laura suggests to him that he needs to forget his earthly preconceptions, and that the nature of service is important everywhere to both incarnates and discarnates. And she says to him, incarnates are simply preparing for the spirit of service. And then they go on and talk about material earnings, again, his attachment to material things and not having made that breakthrough yet. So it's the material earnings versus the spirit of service, and then the notion of the moral value of work. And he begins during this conversation with Laura an awakening to new concepts. That the more time contributed, the more intercessions that are granted. And that nothing is without a price. And to receive, we must give something in return. And he begins to see the value in the process of earning, of profiting, of cooperating, and serving. And he slowly begins the process of letting go. And his new perspectives continue with this conversation with Laura. And she offers him a generous suggestion. She says to him, no one will turn down the cooperation of a willing spirit who loves to work for the sheer pleasure of serving. And it resonates. It begins to resonate with him. And then she tells him that the science of beginning anew is one of the most noble ones that a spirit can learn. And Laura then begins to give him the example of Paul of Tarsus, who retires to the desert to begin his human experience again as a poor tent maker. And she tells him that he needs to work, and this is the generous suggestion, to work for the good of others that you may find your own good. And he begins then to go through this process, and he understands that his mental activities up until this point had been focused on questioning, always questioning, this inquisitive mind of perhaps the physician, but clearly of someone who was, as Jose said, so perhaps a little self-absorbed. And in this introspection here, he begins to be silent. And in that silence, there's a discovery. And that discovery is a new kind of mental activity. Prayer. And he begins to see prayer as a valuable and sensible resource for the purpose of service. So his new insight here becomes an understanding as never before. And understanding becomes an important component of his progress. And he's beginning to connect the dots of self-effort and humility. I think I went ahead. Sorry. And then in the next portion, he transitions to the work, and he finally getting some work. And it's during a conversation with Minister Genesio, where he's asking for work in Nosolar. He's been flittering around from one department to another with no real purpose, just sort of self-satisfaction of his mental inquisitions. And in this meeting with this minister, he gains another insight, which is he has only received benefits during his time in Nosolar. And he has not produced one single thing in return. And it shakes him. And it's the first sign of humility and the first sign of honesty. So his insight here is that he has been living imprisoned within his own preconceptions of himself, which were self-centered, self-absorbed. And he begins to understand the responsibility of each child of God in the infinite work of creation. Sincerity at last. And that's, in my opinion, that's his breakthrough moment right there. And it's quickly followed while he's working in an institution with Narcissa in the Chamber of Rectification, where there are these really suffering souls, and Narcissa is an aide and a nurse. And he's visiting, and he's being introduced around, and he's being quite taken by the suffering of these spirits. And they reach a point where collectively all of these spirits are in such bad way that this one nurse, this one person, Narcissa, is simply overwhelmed and she can't keep up. And then a remarkable thing happens. André Luiz instinctively jumps in and begins to clean up this wretched, foul material that all of these spirits are excreting. And the fact that he demonstrated that humility was staggering, not just to him. He wasn't even really conscious of it. But to those around him, they were literally in disbelief. And then there's a line there, which in a later chapter, but it's so appropriate, which is, "Blessed are the debtors who are in a position to repay." And André Luiz never realized the sanctified blessings of an opportunity. I think we've missed a slide. I'm sorry. Give me a second here. Oop. Somehow we dropped some slides. So his mission is one of active service. And in returning to his terrestrial home at the end of Nosolar, he sees that everything has changed. His wife is remarried, they've changed the decor, there's no remnants of André Luiz. In fact, he's been banished. His name has been banished from the house. And this is heartbreaking to him because he's still so tied to his material needs and instincts. But he has, through the course of it, and seeing that her second husband, who replaced him in his mind, is deathly ill. And he becomes touched by that. And he gains another understanding of why his return was delayed by his mentors and colleagues and friends in Nosolar, why they prevented him from returning home. And he finally gets it, that he wasn't ready. He wasn't prepared for what he was going to witness. All the pain and suffering that he would endure, because he had still been tied to all of his material tendencies and relationships, and because of his pride and his ego. And then he has a visit from one of his mentors, Clarencio, who says to him in a very compassionate way, but short of offering any help to him, he simply says to him, "I'll give you a recommendation from Jesus." And he says, quote, "Love God above all things and our neighbor and as ourselves. It always works real miracles of happiness and understanding of our path." And then his reflection becomes his fight against selfishness, no longer as an act of a man of the earth. Again, that's part of his breakthrough. And then he begins to become dominated by true love. Love for his family, love for his wife, and indeed love for her husband. And he begins to place the needs of others ahead of his own. And then he engages in something he's never done before. He engages in very deep prayer for this man who is his wife's husband, for his recovery. And through this fervent prayer, he's joined by Narcissa, who then, through passes and healing, is able to help this man to recover. The doctors determine it's a miracle. And for the first time, André Luiz feels jubilation in his soul. And he recognizes another insight, that the powerful ties of his lower emotions had been broken forever. And he had been totally changed through practical lessons of understanding and fraternity. And on his return to No Solar, he's greeted by his mentor, and he is accepted as a citizen of No Solar. And the conclusion is, our path of progress is like a jigsaw puzzle. Each trial, each experience, each learning opportunity is simply a piece of the puzzle whose picture will be reaching relative perfection in the presence of our Father. And I'd like to leave you then with this quote from Chico. Thank you very much.
Enjoy how, Pat, you were discussing how love from deep down in the soul can help overcome myriad of obstacles and create true miracles. And as such, I'd like to, as our panel leaves the stage, please give them another round of a hand. Hopefully, with the benefits of this symposium, we can see that the work that André Luiz started has helped and has got the ball rolling on all these spiritual, physical connections that have brought us and have continued to link everything together, and how efforts have been made. Our keynote speaker and some of the other lectures we have tonight will also help benefit in seeing how, where André Luiz kind of started to illustrate the point, how we have worked to reinforce these notions and how to prove it on our side of life, and also to take these teachings and make it a reality to improve ourselves and to help heal ourselves.